I will link the recording before I leave each day. All right, so I did get -7, so we can look at how I worked through that. I distributed the -4, which gave me -4 plus 20n equals, and then a negative times a negative is positive 18n. Negative times a positive is -18. Now you could have subtracted 20n from both sides, but I didn't want to deal with the negative, so I subtracted the 18n. So when I did that, this canceled out, and it gave me -4, and this is plus 2n equals -18, and then add 4 to both sides. So 2n equals -14, divide by 2, and n equals -7. So last week we started factoring. We're going to finish up factoring because remember we said there are 3 methods to solve a quadratic: factoring, quadratic formula, and completing the square. So today we're going to finish up factoring and start working on a quadratic formula. When you take your tests, you will have to do each one of those methods. There will be questions where you have to factor, one question where you do the quadratic formula, and one question where you complete the square. All right, so take a moment and copy down these 2. Go ahead and just copy down F so you have, because I'm not sure how much space it's going to require. So we'll just do one at a time. So we're still solving by factoring. These are our last 2 questions that we're going to solve by factoring, and then we'll get into the quadratic formula. So this is factoring. This is not a quadratic. This is a 3rd degree. So remember I said that this, whatever your exponent is, this tells you how many solutions we're looking for. So because this is a 3rd degree, I know that I'm looking for 3 answers, okay? So in order to factor it, do you all see how there's 4 terms? We got 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So anytime you see 4 terms, I'm going to write this off. That is where you factor by grouping. So you're going to put the first 2 in the parentheses and take out the GCF, and the second 2 in parentheses and take out the GCF. So we're going to look at these 2 together, and then put these 2 in a group together. So looking at my first group, the one that's in green parentheses, what is the greatest common factor for those 2 terms? Only looking at these 2 terms. What do you think my GCF would be? X squared. Yep. So we're going to actually take out an x squared. Let me actually write that in a different color. Hold on. So for this first group, I'm going to take out an x squared. Whenever you take out a GCF, that's division. So that means I'm dividing these terms by x squared. When you divide them both by x squared, what do you have left over? X plus 1, yep. Who agrees with Marcus that it's x plus 1? Okay, so we have x cubed divided by x squared, that's x, and then anything divided against itself is 1. So 5 divided by 5 is 1, x divided by x is 1, x squared divided by x squared is 1. So now let's look at this red group. What do you think my GCF is that I'm going to take out of this 2? What? A -1. Good. So I'm going to take a -1, put that here. And in parentheses, I want you to write what you have left over when you divide it by -1. And you should get the same thing, x plus 1. Whenever you factor by grouping, when you take out your GCF, what you have left should be the same. So I want you to notice how that is the exact same thing. If you don't get the same thing when you take out your GCF, that means you took out the wrong GCF. All right, so now we're ready to finish this out. Go ahead and make your 2 parentheses. So in one parentheses, I have my x plus 1. And in my second parentheses, I'm going to put my GCFs. So I'm going to put the x squared and the minus 1. Now that can be factored down again. X squared minus 1 is the difference of squares, and that factors down to x plus 1 and x minus 1. So we have our 3 factors, and we still have our 3 solutions. When you set each one of these equal to 0, you get x equals -1 twice. You don't have to write it twice, though. And x equals +1. So we have 3 solutions. This one we will call a double root, because we get that same answer twice. We have 2 factors that are the same. So we have 2 different answers, but that x minus 1 is a double root. And that would be my solutions. Any questions about that? All right, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit and give you all a chance to copy down G. G is the same as F. It's 4 terms. We're going to group them and take out the GCF. So what do you think our GCF will be in that green group? What do they both have that we can take out? X squared, yep, let's take it out. And that's gonna leave us with 3x plus 4. So what do you think I have to divide? Because I need to divide something out of these 2 in order to get a 3x plus 4. So what do you think? What number am I taking out of both of these? Not just a +9, but a -9. And when you divide both of these by -9, again, you get that same 3x plus 4. So we know we did it right, because these 2 have to match, and they do match. So my first factor is 3x plus 4. And then my second factor, I have my x squared minus 9. Now, x squared minus 9 can factor down. That's the difference of squares. What do you think that factors down to? Yep, x plus 3, x minus 3. So we have our 3 factors, y'all. So these are our 3 factors. Now you're going to set each one of these equal to 0 to get your 3 solutions. One of them will be a fraction, and the other 2 will not. So go ahead and find your 3 solutions. Remember, keep them as fractions. Don't change them to a decimal. So for the first one, you have to subtract 4 and divide by 3. And the other 2, you just have 1 step. All right, questions or comments about that?
Could I put plus or minus 3?
Yep, you could also just put x equals plus minus 3. All right, questions or comments, what y'all think? thinking back to last year, I think this was one of the questions that kids missed the most. So just remember, when you see 4 terms, you have to factor by grouping. All right, so that's the end of factoring. So now let's talk about the discriminant test. So in your notes, go ahead and write down the discriminant test. If you don't know it already, go ahead and copy down the quadratic formula and then glue that sheet of paper down. So this piece right here, this is what I gave you to glue down. So you don't have to write this out. You could just glue that down. Save you some time, because time is of the essence. So go ahead, copy down the discriminant, the quadratic formula. The discriminant is what's underneath the square root. So when we talk about the discriminant, this is only b squared minus 4ac. So again, you're just copying this piece down right here and then glue down that sheet of paper quickly, and then we're going to do some practice. So if you're asked to find the discriminant, you don't need to do the entire quadratic formula. You're only going to do b squared minus 4ac. So in the homework 1, there's a few questions where all you have to do is find a discriminant. You don't have to do the whole thing. So oftentimes I will do that. I will like have a little cutout to save you all time from copying stuff down. So if you do your discriminant and you get a number that's positive, that means you have 2 real solutions. If you get a number that is negative, you have 2 imaginary solutions. And if you get 0, you have 1 real solution. So let's go ahead and do some practice. So we're only going to do the discriminant. So I'll give you a minute to copy down these 3 questions. And we're not doing the whole quadratic formula. All we're going to do is our discriminant piece. We're just doing b squared minus 4ac. So I'll give you a minute to copy down the directions, and then we'll work through a few of these together. So just like with factoring and the quadratic formula, you have to make sure it's set equal to 0. So the examples I gave you, they're already set equal to 0. After lunch, we all got sleepy, huh? Jim Quayle over there asleep. You okay? Oh, okay. That's what I was saying. Just making sure. Got tired.
I think I seen his eyes shut.
I know. So go ahead and just copy down one at a time. So we'll just do our 2x squared minus 4x plus 2. We'll do that one together. And then I'll let you do 2 and 3 on your own. Again, we're not doing the entire quadratic formula. All we're going to do is b squared minus 4ac. So a in this first one is 2. B is negative 4. And C is positive 2. When you put this in your calculator, and this is a very common mistake, this is not going to give you the right answer. What do you think is wrong with the way I wrote that? Because if you type it in your calculator like that, you will get the wrong answer. Parentheses around the negative. So you have to include parentheses. Go ahead and type that in your calculators just like that. You have to put parentheses around the negative. Right, you don't have to. I usually just tell kids to do it all the time because they forget when to do it and when not to do it. But it's only necessary if it's negative. So let me see if I could do this without a calculator. So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times, so 16 minus, so 0. Who got 0? So because our discriminant is 0, going back to what we cut out, anytime you get 0, that means you have one real solution. That's what that means. This quadratic has one real solution. We don't know what that solution is. We just know that there's only one. All right, if you haven't already, go ahead and do number 2. It's already set equal to 0, so A is 6, B is -9, and C is +4. Again, it's B squared minus 4 times A times C. Go ahead, type that in your calculator. And then again, all you're going to tell me is, do we have one solution, 2 solution, or no solution? On the cutout where it says, when it says negative, you might want to write that 2 imaginary is the same as saying 0 real. So if you have 2 imaginary, that means you just have no x-intercepts. That's what that means. All right, so go ahead and figure out what we have. So 81 minus, okay, so I think you get a negative number. Is it Jaden? Jalen? Yeah. Elijah. I got the last name Merriweather. Just don't have the first name. What'd you get, Elijah? What did you get? Negative 15. Anybody else get negative 15? All right, so because it's negative, what does that tell us? 2 imaginary, or you could say 0 real. I will take either one. So this parabola does not have any x-intercepts. All right, let's do our last one. So A is -6, B is +6, and C is 5. So B squared minus 4 times A times C. A is -9. You are correct. Let me fix that immediately. -9. So A is -9, B is 6, C is 5. So it's B squared minus 4 times A times C. Go ahead, type that in your calculator and see what you get. All right, did you get 216?
Yes.
All right, so it's positive. So what does that tell us? How many solutions do we have? 2 real solutions. All right, so there are a few questions in the homework where all you have to do is your discriminant test. So now let's actually do the entire quadratic formula. All right, so go ahead and copy down A. We'll just do one at a time. I think these are only 2. Let me see. Yep, these are our last 2 questions. So we're going to do the entire quadratic formula. So I didn't realize that all my examples are already set equal to 0. So that's not good. But realize that they have to equal 0. So that means you might have to add or subtract something. A is the number in front of x squared. So A is 1. B is -4. C is 2. I always like to start with a discriminant, just like we just did. I think that's the easiest to do. So in your calculator, B squared -4 AC. Let's figure out what that is. All right, who got 8? All right, so remember in the quadratic formula, that's this part right here. This is this part that's underneath the square root. So let's figure out what is the square root of 8. So now we got to go back and do some more algebra 2, if you remember this. We have to simplify the square root of 8. So the perfect square that goes into 8 is 4. We're going to take that 4 and break it apart to 4 times 2. The square root of 4 is 2. So this is my simplified discriminant. You do have to simplify it. If there's a perfect square underneath, you have to simplify it. So from here, we're ready to just finish it out. So x equals, now it's the opposite of b. So when b is negative, we have to switch that to a +4. And then it's plus or minus. We're going to put our discriminant, which is 2√2. And that's divided by 2 times a, or 2 times 1, which is 2. If you got that, if you left that on the test, I would be happy, but I would still take off a ½ point, because even though I'm really, really happy with that, there is something else we could do. And we can reduce that. When you reduce it, you're looking at everything except what's underneath the square root. So looking at these 3 numbers, what can I divide into those 3 numbers? 2. So the answer that I'm looking for on our test would be 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. Now you could put it over 1, but you don't really have to do that. And that is your answer. Okay, so for the quadratic formula, you see where it has, hold on, let me bring this down a little bit. Do you see where it says -b? That means you flip the sign. So if it's negative, you flip it to a positive. If it's positive, you flip it to a negative. All right, so that would be my final answer. All right, let's do this last question. It's already set equal to 0. So A is 4. B is -1, and C is +2. Go ahead and find your discriminant. B squared -4 times A times C. You okay, Ava? This lunch isn't put y'all to sleep. You all might need to drink some Pepsi or something at lunch. Some Coke or something. Y'all putting me to sleep. So let's see, 1 minus 32, 31, -31. Who got -31? All right, so now we have a negative underneath a square root. So we're going to start talking about this soon, but does anybody remember what you have to do when there's a negative? Yeah, you have to separate it. You cannot take the square root of -31. So we have to break that apart to -1 times the square root of 31. And the square root of -1 is I. So that is my discriminant. So from here, we're just going to put it into our quadratic formula. So it would be x equals, and it's the opposite of b. So b is -1. So you're going to put a +1 plus or minus, and then we have our discriminant, and that's divided by 2. And that's divided by 2 times 4. And what is 2 times 4? 8. Now we cannot reduce this one though, because looking at these numbers, the only thing that goes into 1, 1, and 8 is 1. So this is actually my final answer. All right, I'm going to end there. Use this time to continue working through homework 1. We are just about done with everything. You should be really close to having homework 1 finished. So use this time. Remember, it's due at the beginning of class on Thursday.